and here we are at another edition of Black Guys on White Movies, Halloween edition. We are deep in the thick of the scary movies. I am Aaron Covington, along with
Amon Adumer, along with
Bernard Harris. And when you said Halloween edition, I really wish there was like cut to like sound effect of like a wolf howling or something like that.
I almost did it. I was like, what's the sound
Right,
effect?
get the soundboard out.
well, yeah, we gotta scale up one day. We get enough listeners. Which, by the way,
Hint, hint.
one of my greatest joys in life is supporting my friends. People have a project coming out. I'm gonna go check it out. You got a podcast? I'm gonna listen and subscribe. Maybe not every episode, but I'm gonna check you out and see what you're talking about. I'm gonna subscribe. It costs nothing to be an active participant. So, like, subscribe, and share. I saw somebody shared a post for something, but it was like an advertisement recently, and I'm like, you can share an advertisement. You can share your friend's pod or a pod that you listen to. People share stuff all the time, but sometimes when it's somebody they know, there's less shares. It's sad. Support your pals. Support things that you're into. Like, subscribe, and share. Follow us on Instagram. And this week we're bringing you, continuing the Halloween month, the classic, the spooky, the scariest movie of the 1990s, Hocus Pocus.
Hocus Pocus, for sure.
Just saying the name gives me chills. Hocus Pocus.
A name they said a few times in the movie, and every time they said it, I said, they said it. They said it.
I love it when a project says the title within the course of the project.
That's a clap moment in the theater. You're like, oh.
Right.
At least this one kind of lends itself to it. And it didn't, I guess it still didn't have to, but it is a witch movie and they are making potions and stuff.
You got to really,
and it's a giant book of spells.
I was just gonna say, you really got to take the opportunity though, as a performer, to just like dramatically turn towards camera, take a pregnant pause, and then say the title of the project.
Screenwriters on set. What? That's not the script. It's in my contract. Black movie of the week. There's actually a few to mention. Bernard sent this movie, Vampires versus the Bronx. It's on Netflix. You want to tell us about this movie? I haven't seen this one.
Yeah, for sure. So Vampires versus the Bronx, as I was watching Hocus Pocus, it definitely gave me a feel of Vampires versus the Bronx. That movie's from 2020, November 2020.
Yeah, a newer movie.
Definitely a newer movie. So obviously, I'm sure it was inspired in some ways by Hocus Pocus, not the reverse. But that's the one that I got the vibe for, and it's a really fun movie. It's about 4 kids, all of whom are Black, 3 of whom are Afro-Caribbean. There's 1 Haitian, 1 Puerto Rican, 1 Dominican, and then a Black American kid. And vampires are moving in. They're the only ones who seem to know. But it's really about like gentrification, right? These people are moving into their inner city neighborhood that is now like, the prices are so affordable. But of course, they're vampires because...
So like the similarity is saving the neighborhood, basically.
Yeah, the similarity I think is it's totally that 90s kid adventure movie where you round up the gang of kids and you're running through the streets, you're jumping on bikes, that sort of deal.
Little E.T. Well, that reminded me of Attack the Block. Remember that movie?
Yeah, totally.
About a decade or so ago. Kind of John Boyega's breakout movie for sure. It was really great British movie, and it's the same thing, but it's not vampires moving in. It's like an alien invasion that they're running from.
Right.
That's coming into their projects, basically the London projects.
I was just gonna say, just because we've talked about vampires now and John Boyega, for anybody who's interested, there was the first thing that I ever saw him in was the year before that movie, and it's a web series called Becoming Human. It was like a spinoff of a British show called Being Human, but it's about vampires, and John Boyega is like the high school bully. So it's an early peak in his career.
Oh yeah, definitely check him out early.
But all that made us think of like, since this is a movie about witches, witchcraft is really such a Black thing. So I wanted to give a quick shout out to Black witches. There's this movie Master starring Regina Hall that takes place in Massachusetts, and it's very witchy. I haven't seen it. I've seen previews and I've read about it, and it was something I found in searching for Black witch movies. And so I'm gonna check it out. I'll let you guys know in the future about it. But it's definitely like witches are part of this school in Massachusetts that is kind of has become the place of witchery in the United States because of Salem.
Yeah, for sure.
But also shout out to some of the Black witches past. Shout out to Rachel True from the movie Craft from 1997.
Yep.
Shout out to Bianca Lawson, who is still playing teenagers at 40 something, but was in Witches of East End, also was in the Vampire Diaries, also was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like just any high school like TV scary thing through the 90s and the 2000s she was in.
100%.
Shout out to the show Motherland, Fort Salem, a very diverse class. A few of the lead witches are Black in that also, and just a completely different take on witches. It's like historical, alternate history kind of thing, but witches are real and they like have their own faction of the government. It's crazy.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, in the way they rewrite American history in that show, some of the Black witches are very important early on to American history. So it's like a whole different racial dynamic.
Ooh, 100%. That's dope.
Yeah. So there are a bunch of Black witches. There were Black witches. American Horror Story had a Black witch in the season, but we don't really have a Black witch movie. Like a strong Black. Okay, so then I searched Black witch movies on a search engine. And a couple interesting article titles came up. How Hollywood has failed Black witches is one. How Hollywood has failed Black witches according to real Black witches. And another one is Black witches, why can't they get respect in pop culture? And when you think about the history, well, when you look up the history of like witchcraft and voodoo and hoodoo and these things that really have origins in Africa, and it's like, it's crazy there hasn't been a Black witch figure, an iconic kind of Black witch figure somewhere in 100 years of TV and cinema.
Yeah.
Man, is Storm from the X-Men, like, because they often call her like a witch, like because she was like treated as such as a kid or whatever. Like, is that like kind of in a weird way, the biggest like iconic Black witch character?
For sure. I think
I can be sold on
you're
that, for sure.
Yeah. I think the deeper you are in the X-Men comics, you see that a lot with her character.
Yeah, that's weird though. There's not a lot, no.
And then she wasn't even like she was in all the movies. Halle Berry obviously was her first, but she was always background to me, or like side character, It was like known she was important and she would do something important in the movie, but there was so little development for her characters in the movie. I was always kind of bummed about that. But she was great in the animated series from the 90s. She had a lot of good stuff in that, from what I remember.
And I'll shout out anybody out there who has interest in the comic books or is a comic head. Storm has been leader of the X-Men numerous times over the decade. So definitely did not really showcase all that character was in those movies, to your point.
Yeah, no, totally. And as you're saying this, thinking about the hoodoo and like how it's so specifically the roots come from Africa, it makes me wonder if we can't have a Black movie because it's either too truthful, so it has to either be based in the truth of it, or if people from the outside are like culturally appropriating it and being like, oh yeah, oh let's take what they do and then let's put a little British boy in it and turn it into something fun or whatever. Versus
let's hold off on that part of it until we get back into our movie a little bit. But I think there's a lot to that. and it's not even just black, just to, it's just a lot of indigenous cultures. There's a lot of witchy and witchcraft in any indigenous culture. And, I know, yeah, so
And I would
it's
argue,
really something that's lacking in
sure,
media.
true.
and I will argue that a lot of the things about even like Anglo witch culture, right? Like is like back to their indigenous times, like
For
thousands
sure.
of years ago. So,
Yeah,
but
like
yeah,
chanting, like like Irish maids and Scottish maids and stuff. Also,
totally.
there's this Netflix series, it looks like, that may already have been out, called Siempre Bruja, Always a
Mm.
Witch.
Okay.
Uh, Afro Latina lead. So there's some black witch. This is the time it would start. We're starting to see more diverse stuff. So, that might be worth checking out too. But anyway, let me read this synopsis for Hocus Pocus and we can get into it. A teenage boy named Max and his little sister move to Salem, where he struggles to fit in before awakening a trio of diabolical witches that were executed in the 17th century. Man, if you're just like reading log lines and you come across that twist in that log line, that is a crazy turn of tone. He struggles to fit in before awakening a trio of diabolical witches that were executed in a. You're like, oh, a kid and his sister. Oh, it's hard to move to a new town. It's a small indie movie. What diabolical witches that were
on,
executed back to life?
on top of being awkward? Oh man.
Oh, no, he'll never fit in now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's funny too about the fitting in piece. I think maybe we'll get into it more, but this movie was so horny. My God.
Mhm.
Horror and horny go together for sure. We're,
Mhm.
if we hadn't thought about it before, we're figuring it out now.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
If your horror movie isn't kind of horny, it might not it might not be playing.
Yeah. Is it
Yeah,
really horror? If it's
that's
not a
interesting.
little bit horny? No.
It's like suppressed horniness.
For sure.
Yeah. And very like based in like the Puritan values. Like uh we
Oh,
need
totally.
we'll get into it, but that we need that virgin blood and like the this and the that and the what's good and what's bad. Um
This movie, just going through the cast and crew real quick, and we can get into the discussion. It's directed by a guy, Kenny Ortega, who actually did a lot of choreography
oh
also
yeah.
for
Yeah.
like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which has some cool dance sequences, which we did that movie. Dirty Dancing, um, High
Hmm.
School Musical 3.
Yeah, most notably the director
Most
of the High
notably.
School Musical franchises.
Yeah, it looked like he
Yeah.
worked with Disney quite a bit. He did that. He did the Descendants trilogy, it looks like, which was kind of big in the last maybe 5 to 10 years. I saw Cheetah Girls on there. So I mean, this dude's been at work in this kind of like
Yeah.
realm.
And he's worked also with like Cher and Gloria Estefan, Michael Jackson on their like concert movies or concerts too. So
Hmm.
very, very talented artist. This movie also stars just three legends as the witches.
Oh
Really.
Bette
yeah.
Midler, Bette not Midler, Bette don't call her Midler,
Ooh, yep. AKA.
SJP,
Hmm.
Carrie, aka Carrie, Sarah Jessica Parker, still
Hmm.
dominating with and just like that on the Sex and the City spinoff, and Kathy Najimy. I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name.
I was sure
Najimy,
Kathy and Jimmy.
Najimy,
Yeah.
Najimy. I
Okay.
looked this up. Um,
More like Kathy
she's
McKills
part
it. How about
she's
that?
part Lebanese. I didn't realize that. I knew something, but I didn't know what.
Mm.
But of course, she's been in just a ton of movies, and I didn't know she was the voice of Peggy Hill on King of the Hill
I never knew
at
that.
all.
Yeah, I never knew that.
Yeah, amazing. But also, of course, she was classic in both Sister Act movies.
Yes.
Uh,
Right.
she's somebody that just you kind of just always see her face. She's always in something.
Truly.
I didn't
Yeah.
realize how much voiceover work she did, but yeah, she was also in a show called Good Witch on an episode. So they were like, get one of the main witches back.
for sure.
That's great. She didn't get typecast in that role because she's had a career, but
Yeah.
it was fun for her to come back to it. Like, oh yeah.
For
And
sure.
of course, there's a Hocus Pocus too. That's another thing about horror movies. It's got to be a bit horny, repressed sexuality, and it's
Mhm.
a franchise or a franchise eventually. Because the Hocus Pocus 2 came out like last year.
Right, like 28 years or something like that, 29 years later.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I thought about watching it. I just didn't get around to it. I kind of just started this one too late. But Hocus Pocus 2 was written by Jen D'Angelo,
Oh
who is
yeah.
somebody that Amon and I know from improv out here in LA.
Very cool.
Wow.
Very talented improviser and writer. So shout out.
Yeah, we'll have to check it out then for sure.
Definitely.
Definitely got to check it out. Got to support. This is what we are talking about.
Mhm. We got to share.
Okay. Hocus Pocus, which was, a fun, zany movie. Amon, what did you think of? What did you think of this movie?
Yeah,
What were
I'd
your
never.
initial?
I've seen pieces of this movie just randomly around town. Like during Halloween, they'll be like, "Oh, we're showing Hocus Pocus. It's kid friendly," um, and I'll just like see little bits of it. This was just a fun, zany movie, like you were saying. This was like a enjoyable. Um, Not a big fan of horror movies myself. This is the type of horror movie I could rewatch over time,
Mhm.
and in the future, Lord willing, if I have kids, I'll rewatch it with them, and if I don't, I'll watch it with the neighbors' kids. It's just a fun movie.
For sure.
I definitely think calling it horror is a bit of a stretch.
Yeah,
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 on
It's
the
a Halloween
Wikipedia,
movie for sure.
Halloween for sure. They call it a fantasy comedy film on the
right.
Wikipedia because
Okay, that fits.
there's nothing particularly scary about this except maybe for a very young kid, it's just like the images,
Hmm.
like the makeup they use on the witches or the zombie character. Those things are just inherently kind of
The
scary.
zombie character. I think the eye on the book. If I was a kid and I saw that, it would be kind of bothering. It
Yeah,
would bother me.
you
Like, oh,
you be looking at every book like, oh my god,
uh-huh. Yeah.
don't wake up.
Right.
Shout
I
out
know.
to the zombie character Billy, who's played by Doug Jones.
I noticed that.
Ooh,
Yeah, and if you're
icon.
a fan of movies, you know Doug Jones. This is one of his early movies.
Yeah, it had to be. I
This is
mean,
one of his really early roles,
it's 30
and
year old
he's
movie.
like the body guy, right? Like how would you
Yeah.
say it? He was in Batman Returns, which we also did as Thin Clown. Thin
Mm,
Clown.
Okay.
But now he's the guy that, like, if you have an alien character that walks really funny, has a really kind of crazy body, he's probably playing that character.
for sure.
Either
Yeah.
in a costume or in a green screen suit
Right.
and walking around on all fours, or like he was
Oh, he
the
was in
Frog in
The
Pan's
Shape of
Labyrinth.
Water.
He
The
was the
Shape
guy
of
in Shape of Water.
Right.
He
Uh,
does a lot of that kind of stuff now, and
yeah, he was
really
a
legendary
Hellboy,
for it.
a similar
Hellboy.
kind of
That's right.
fish
Hellboy.
guy in Hellboy for sure. So a lot of that sort of stuff, and of course, uh, the other Guillermo del Toro movie. Man, I'm blanking on it.
Yeah, Pan's
Pan's
Labyrinth.
Labyrinth. Yeah, for
That's
sure.
what. Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
No.
really unique looking guy with a contortionist. He is labeled as a contortionist and a mime here. So
Yeah. He was great. The kids were great in it. And before I seen the movie, I thought that the three actresses who played the witches, I was like, oh, those are names. I recognized Sarah Najimy and the other two, like Bette Midler and Sarah
Kathy,
Jessica Parker.
Kathy and Jimmy,
Kathy Najimy, Sarah
Sarah
Jessica
Jessica
Parker,
Parker,
and Bette
Bette
Not
Midler.
Mid Litter. Yes.
It's catching
Uh,
on. It's catching on.
I recognized their names. And so when I watched the movie, I was like, oh, wow, they're playing like, at least Sarah Jessica Parker in my head is the biggest actor right now, maybe,
Right,
of those folks.
right.
And to watch her play like a support role was very was pretty dope. I was like, oh, this is nice. It's probably just fun.
That is it is interesting. Bette Midler was for sure like the lead at the time of this movie. Her career, she probably had her like peak in her career in a sense of like popularity and notoriety. So she was already like established. This was
Yeah.
before Sex in the City. So Sarah Jessica Parker was a movie star, but I mean Bette Midler was Bette Midler at this time. She had dominated music and film. You know, she had done it all. And then Kathy Najimy, I think at this point was, let me look it up. She was more new to the industry, and you know, maybe this was more of a, but she had done Sister Act before this, so she was hot, you know, at the time. But it
I
is
thought
crazy, yeah. Sarah Jessica Parker goes on and does Sex in the City, and is like
Mm-hmm. Takes off.
on the stratosphere, you know.
it is kind of crazy with this cast as I was like looking through IMDb's. I mean, it looks like the main actor, Omri Katz, who plays Max, looks like he kind of maybe stepped out of the industry at a certain point, but like pretty much
Yeah,
everyone else is working. Just these actors have not stopped working. You know what I mean? Thora Birch, who plays the little girl, I mean, she has at least one credit in almost every year since 1989. Like,
yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah.
yeah. She's working hard, and the other girl, Danny, the girl he had or Allison, he had a crush on,
Mm-hmm.
has been in a bunch of stuff too. Ray Donovan. She was actually the girl in Eyes Wide Shut when he went to the
Oh,
when he went to the wrong house, you know, and it was like the underage girl that and the guy and the dad was a tailor or something like that. I don't remember that movie that well.
Yeah,
You just remember the images of it, not every plot detail.
yeah. I think
mhm.
that's
But
the
anyway, she's been working pretty steadily since too. So that's impressive and great for them.
Yeah. Great launching point.
B, what were your thoughts on this movie?
I thought it was super enjoyable. I had a lot of fun. Uh, you know, I never saw it as a kid. This was the first time seeing it. Um, I think it was just kind of like I would have been 10. I think I was right around that time where I was like, man, if you ain't shooting lasers, blowing up a spaceship, I ain't got no fucking time for it.
Yeah.
But you know, I thought it was great. It's just real fun to see people who are clearly like, in order to perform these characters in these roles, like you have to kind of let it go and have fun, right?
Yeah.
You don't make all of those crazy faces and goofy pratfalls and stuff without it. So it's really just kind of fun watching those actors perform in that way. And it made me also think of like the movie Casper, which was only a couple years after this, but just like again that whole era, which doesn't really happen anymore, but of like the kids on a mission to save the neighborhood, sort of
Mhm.
all of those things kind of go straight to streaming or cable now, which is fine. But
Yeah. I mean, there's something that stand out to me for this movie that make it really enjoyable. One is, I mean, the practicalness of it all and just watching it, you know, with my partner. And it's like, yeah, practical stuff. When I watch a movie and the effects are more practical, uh, you kind of automatically forgive a lot, you know, because now you're in a world where what is possible is actually what's actually like possible, you know. And of
Mhm.
course, in this or an Exorcist, like them flying on brooms or the tables and stuff moving by themselves aren't things that really happen. But the way they happen is based in the reality. You know what I mean? They
yeah,
had to be on something that propelled them up off the ground. So
Yeah.
like the way their clothes fall, the way everything looks is like that's natural to it. And even if it can look a little corny at times, it's like, well, real life is kind of corny looking. There
Hmm.
was a scene where they're talking to Billy, and it's like the three witches, and Billy's over here, right? And it's a three shot on them, and like Kathy and Sarah Jessica Parker in the back just like mugging and making faces at each other and being like weird witches, and Bet is the only one talking. And it made me think like when you watch a video online of an event that happened, like a fight at a stadium or something happens at the Beyonce concert and stuff, movies now, what they do so much is like zoom in on somebody close up and the music is perfect and you're in that moment and stuff. But in real life, the things just kind of happen and everything is lit kind of evenly for, you know what I mean? You're watching from afar and things just kind of happen fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sometimes that's more real than always like punching in or having a specific mood lighting that you know was set up for hours to cover the scene. It's like they're just flying and talking and then they fly away. And I know there's a lot of practical reasons why, and maybe contractual reasons why these witches are almost always in a 3-shot. It's very like a close up on one of them. But whatever it is, it kind of gives this kind of voyeuristic surveillance reality to it. So that was one thing that, you know, kind of just consistently sticks out when you watch older movies. It's like, I know there's a lack, they're not quite as sophisticated as movies nowadays sometimes, but it can hit harder. Even the comedy,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely like the horror, and even the action scenes sometimes when they're not so super choreographed can sometimes be like, man, he smacked the crap out of them, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, the
also,
physics. I was just saying
yeah,
the physics are like real, and you can just tell that. You don't even have to think about it. You see it every day.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Like
And I'm
CGI, the physics are never real.
no, they're never real. And I've been watching movies from that era recently, uh, horror movies especially. And I saw Poltergeist just recently for the first time.
Mm,
And the moments where they try to bring the CG in
mm,
as like the CG is the scary thing,
Yeah,
it just doesn't feel as weighty, as real, as if they just had someone, even if it's a bad costume of just like a puppet or some kind of thing coming out of a door, as opposed to just a video game looking thing coming out.
right.
It would make the physics more real, and then the reactions would feel a little more real too.
mhm.
Anyways, we're against
100%.
CG over here. We hate it.
I mean, there's got to be other ways. It can't all be CG, I guess, would
I
be
mean,
my
since
line.
since we're talking about the effects, I did think it was really interesting, like just the place and time, like because it's clearly got digital effects, right? The cat is not talking on its own, and that's not an animatronic cat, right? Like that's a CG
Mhm.
cat. But then, like so many of the other effects almost appeared like the old optical style,
Yeah.
like whenever they had like light or smoke effects that had more of that like 80s or 70s optical effect sort of look, like it was
Uh-huh.
probably animated by hand or something like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And definitely like even the credits in the beginning, that was like optical overlay. So it was just kind of interesting. Like I thought the CGI cat for the time looked pretty good. So it
Yeah.
was pretty interesting to see like both like cutting edge digital effects and like the older optical stuff happen at the same time.
Yeah. They
Mhm.
kind of have to they have to use different strategies, which is also interesting, meld different technologies. Where in like the modern CG movies, it's just one technology. It's just, you know what I mean? One stop
Mhm.
studio to do all the things. But here they had to have like different departments talking and like making it work.
Yeah.
And then like the zaniness of the movie. I mean, this movie had the jokes flying,
Mhm.
zany. The witches were so over the top, so
Zany.
goofy,
Yeah.
but it was enjoyable. But I think it is hard to. It would be hard to get that kind of tone in a movie today. You know, I feel like there's a certain internet backlash that would just kind of maybe tear it
Mhm.
apart. You know,
Mhm.
Mhm.
without consideration that, you know, well, who is this for? It's for kids. It's for families, and it's actually really really fun to watch when done pretty well. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
It's a
sure they
style
made
choice.
yeah, yeah, totally. It's a style choice. And I'm sure they made this thinking it's for kids, but then it became beloved by everybody, like adults, everything.
I
Uh,
think they were making a movie to make a beloved movie. I think they knew, like, I mean, this
sure.
was a common thing at the time, right? This kind of tone,
Yeah.
and even some other movies we've seen on this podcast that we've done on the podcast have had similar tones from a similar era. So this was like du jour. This was of the day.
For sure. I think
it's
even
just kind of sad that it's not up today. Also, it didn't like sustain.
I think even more so to your point, right? Pretty Woman kind of had that slightly zany tone that we talked about at the time. And Gary and Penny Marshall were in this movie. Right? Gary Marshall, the director of that, was the devil dude, and his wife was Penny Marshall.
What a crazy scene.
Wow.
What was happening in that scene?
It was a wild scene.
That's wild. What?
Let's get into the movie a bit. Time is just flying by. All right, so we start with Max, and then we should be able to get into everything we need to from talking about the movie. I won't go plot by plot because it's a pretty simple plot. Like you could sum it up pretty quickly. I mean, we start in the past, and these witches take this guy's sister, take her life force, but he kind of foils them, and they end up getting caught and burned at the stake. But of course, before they do that, they curse him to be a cat forever. And what was crazy, I thought, is right after that happens, we flash ahead to the present day of the movie, and the teacher is like, the family never knew what happened to the boy. And I'm like, what about his sister? What about his sister that was killed by the witches? She's never mentioned in the mythology. What is this erasure here?
Wow.
It's part of the time, you know. The little girl was whatever, but the boy, that could have been a voter, you know.
That could have been a voter. He could have been a shop owner.
Yeah.
So then we're in the school, and Max immediately is just like making himself known to be an outsider.
Yeah.
It's obvious this town cares about Halloween. And he's just like, Halloween's not real, you idiots. It's like, you're the new kid.
I'm from LA, right? Like it's like big kid, big town kid, sort of like chip on the shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also funny how like people also like treat him about that, because like they're making fun of him because he's from LA, like you know what I mean, like because he's an outsider, like you don't get how things work here.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, what about that? What are you saying about that?
I think it's kind of interesting how they're just kind of playing with both sides of that, right? Like he's from not this small town, and he kind of comes in with like, you know, I'm hot stuff. And also it's kind of also the same thing that's like keeping him like ostracized, both by him and by other people. But I do think there's also maybe a little bit, if he would just relax, like people would be cool.
People could be cool.
Yeah, you think so, but then immediately, as Aaron will probably get into, he runs into the town bullies. Right?
Well, before we get to the bullies, I noticed immediately with Max, I just didn't really like this kid. I just didn't really like the actor playing the kid didn't really pop to me. And I'm not trying to hate on Oren Omri Katz in any specific way. I just felt like he just gave a vibe to me that wasn't like the vibe of what the character was doing. I feel like somebody a little more earnest. He was maybe too sarcastic or something. But I get what the character was trying to do. I wasn't feeling the casting. I wasn't feeling the casting, man.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Maybe he went a little too LA. Maybe he was an incredible method actor. And he was like, what would someone from LA think of all this stuff? I'd be sarcastic about it.
Maybe that's a good point. Because I'm from a town more like the size of this town of Salem in this movie than I am from a town the size of LA. So maybe I just had like some small town biases, you know, playing in there.
You would have been in that town bullying him.
100%. You don't like Halloween, bro?
Yeah.
Get out of here. We don't like your also the idea of a kid from LA like hating Halloween like this.
Yeah.
I just don't buy it. Don't buy it. They love LA. They love Halloween in LA. Love it. More than Christmas, more than New Year's. It's all about Halloween out here.
Truly. You just take a ride and you'll go see all the decorations and how much people put into it. It's Halloween Town.
Definitely rivals any Christmas decorations.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's yeah. What did y'all think about the bullies he ran into?
The most like cliche bullies ever. I guess it is a movie from back in the day. I wonder if it was cliche back then, but I'm sure it was. It just feels they didn't beat him up. They didn't do nothing. They didn't even take his bike. They took his shoes. Of all things that were valuable, they took his shoes. I didn't buy it. I didn't buy those bullies.
I don't know, man. Like the bullies were, I mean, it was fun, right? They were clearly like both playing it up, right? Everybody's playing it up in this movie. But like, you know, not to skip ahead too far, but those bullies got him for his shoes, and then later that night get him for his candy. You catch me slipping twice in one day, man. Max, you might need to come back and light up the night on these cats. I'm sorry. Like that's one of those be standing here when I come back sort of deals. Like you're not gonna get me twice in one day. It's not cool.
You gotta pop the trunk, man. One was a rocker, and the other was a white rapper with ice shaved in the back of his hair.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just funny. Just really funny depiction of like two bullies. And basically, you know, Max has the hots for this girl Allison, and there's a lot of like we talked about this from other movies too about a lot of what's the depiction of a white suburb, and this movie played on that, which is definitely a trope of horror movies, especially in the 80s and 90s of like things happening in the suburbs, nobody believing it. The suburb was also kind of shitty for whatever reason. They're kind of crummy. Like none of the kids like it too much. Everybody's bored. You know, I've never seen a depiction of suburbs that was like, man, that would be tight. Any depiction of suburbs is like, oh yeah, that's so inhumane to live like that, and it's so gossipy and awful.
That is true. That's funny.
Yeah, that'd be a better take. Like, man, I gotta get to the suburbs.
I thought it was funny, like when they go to get like Allison, right? The girl that he likes, she's at like her parents' Halloween party. And I was like, what is happening there? Like everybody is dressed in like 1700s, like with the white wigs and everything. And I was just like, this is the creepiest thing in the movie. Like,
well, the creepiest thing was when they went to the old man's house, the witches. So the witches are brought back to life because Max and his little sister, who uses crazy emotional manipulation. I mean, she's yelling and she's crying and like it's all stuff that. And then she's the one that gets him in a fight with the bullies the second time.
Sure.
He's like, we can just go around. She's like, no. She walks past the bullies and they try to jack her for her candy, which is also like, she's a kid, bro. And then she's like, my brother is with me. And it's like 6 of these dudes. And she's like, man, my brother is with me. It's like, girl, can you do math? It's like 6 dudes. They're going to stomp your brother.
Right.
And I was like, man, sometimes they learn young. But this was after she tried to get him to take her trick-or-treating, but he was going to do that anyway. That was already in the cards. The parents weren't going to be like, you don't have to take her. They're going to be like, they were already like, yeah, you got to take her.
Right.
Because we going to this crazy adult Halloween party to get crazy wasted. The adults were MIA in the movie because they were at this all night long Halloween party. Yeah. All the adults in the town.
Yeah.
But the creepiest part was when they were, the witches come back. The brother, the sister, and Allison go to this old abandoned house, and he lights his candle he shouldn't light and takes this book he shouldn't take, brings these witches back to life. And there's a few scenes of the witches understanding they're in a different time period. They go to this guy's house who's Gary Marshall, right? He's in like a devil costume, and he invites them in like there's nobody else in the house except for his wife, who is not giving a crap about Halloween. She's trying to watch TV.
She got rollers in her hair.
Was he trying to set up some like
That's the vibe I got.
sexual party that his wife was not down for? Like in his mind, it was like going to be a raucous, crazy Halloween. He was going to recruit some ladies in, but in her mind, it was going to be bedtime at 9. So I don't know where this disconnect happened with him.
Yes, yes. And the witches come into the house thinking this man dressed as a devil is their actual
the devil.
Is the devil or their master.
Right.
So they call him the master.
Yeah.
And
he's like getting off
makes
on
him
that.
more horny because he's like, I am. They call me master. He says that to his wife, and she's like, "Why are you telling me this? Get these witches out of my house."
Yeah, that was a wild scene. As I said, man, like this movie is incredibly horny. Like the whole, like him lighting the candle. The only reason why it works is because he's a virgin, and they get after my boy.
Roast his
entire movie. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but the movie ends on a roast.
We can just keep going. We don't have to like go chronologically.
Yeah, man. That movie literally ends on a roast about this kid being a virgin.
He's only like what 14, 15 in the movie?
Right.
How much sex is he supposed to have had?
Every person he meets is like, "Are you really a virgin?"
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm a sophomore.
A sophomore that's just been, man. And then even his little sister is like, it worked because he's a virgin. Like, you know, she says it more innocently, but even she stabbed him another time, and it's like,
truly, he's like,
never at one point is somebody like, but he's in high school, not even like a senior. He hasn't even had a prom yet. This is like it's second year in high school, man. Maybe not that big a deal that he's a virgin.
Yeah. Also, not to point out, one, of course, he's a sophomore in high school. Two, he's been in like transition his whole life. He's never had settled down. They just settled down in Salem. He was living in LA. He probably had some things in the works, and then boom, got swept away to a new town, has to restart from zero. Like,
for sure, you start to work on that in at least 7th or 8th grade.
You're building towards something.
You're building a relationship.
Been on so many movie dates.
He's had so much ice cream.
Hilarious.
Movies, you know, all the movie dates that a kid could go on, like literal kids, and he's getting roasted being a virgin for her.
It's funny because like my bad. Every now and again these days, like there's like always like I feel like once a year there's like a article that bubbles up in the news about like new study says Gen Z is having less sex than ever, or something like that, and it's always about how they're isolated through social media, and I'm sure that part of that is true, but it's like since this movie is 30 years old and is definitely of our generation, like I do wonder about those cultural messages that were constantly told to us about how you need to be having sex. You need, like, every movie is about like, oh, tonight's a big night, we're gonna do it. Like, you know, we talked about that in Twilight. And so like, if there is if that is true, and like Gen Z is having less sex and hopefully drinking less and doing less drugs, that these studies always say, like, that's good stuff, I would think. It sounds like if I'm a parent and I'm like in charge of this kid, I think that's good. Like, yeah, maybe age up and then figure it out.
No, you don't have to be getting it in at 13. It's not.
No. Yeah, definitely not. And you don't know enough at 13. You don't know enough about the consequences. You don't know enough about, being safe, what you're doing. You're just like, I'm trying to impress another 13-year-old who's lying to me about them having sex.
Right.
Like,
it just lies back and forth. And at that point, you know, he probably shouldn't have lit that candle either.
Probably shouldn't have lit the candle though. Yeah,
that's true. He shouldn't have been a virgin lighting that candle, that's for sure.
It's definitely should have thought about his sexual experience before lighting that candle.
Well, he was in the house because he was hanging out with the girl.
Right.
He was definitely trying to impress her.
He was trying to make it work.
But after going through something like this, they might have later, you know, because this was quite an ordeal. I mean, they almost died.
This is a bonding experience for sure. You don't
truly. Yeah. If they wouldn't have ended the movie where they ended it, if they would have gave a couple more lines, I feel like it would have turned into like well, don't worry, those ghosts making fun of you about being a virgin, you won't be a virgin for much longer. Something like, something implying there's hope for him to lose his virginity, if that was the goal.
That was the main thing we cared about. Second thing was him, and it was really a movie about, I guess, taking care of your baby sister.
Yeah.
That was like a
Mhm.
theme that ran through. That's what the guy in the past had done, was trying to do. And that's what Max was able to do, basically, even though they weren't after his sister specifically. Maybe for a part of it. I don't know. It was kind of not clear there.
Yeah, I kind of got
They
lost on
just
that
needed
too.
kids. They needed any kids
Yeah, they didn't even kid. They like
to
at some
put the
point
life force
picked
around.
her.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
can't remember why, but at some point in the movie, they just pick her as the kid.
I feel like that
Yeah.
was just because they had been involved. Like that was the youngest kid they had seen, and
Right. And
Mhm.
they were on a time clock, so they
they
needed
were on
to
a
get this
time.
kid lickety splits for sure.
They didn't have much time. And then it's just fun of the witches trying to get the book back, the book of spells back, and then they end up hypnotizing all the kids in the neighborhood, and they wake up these zombies to help him. And Billy is the zombie that wakes up, and he turns on them because he's tired of being bossed around, and he helps the kids back and forth. And then they have to stop the witches at the end. That's pretty much the movie, man. It's not gonna
Yeah,
it's
Mhm.
no,
not.
for sure.
Yeah.
There's no real spoilers. It's not gonna help or hurt your viewing experience.
Mm-mm.
Go into it blind. But I think mom was bringing up something early about like witchcraft and like what's being borrowed, or is it appropriation? And
Mhm.
even in America, where witchcraft is so much about the Salem witch trials, it's all been like condensed into like the myth of that story, which of course is a real historic event, but the mythology of it. I mean, I mentioned the witch stuff earlier. It was like motherhood for Salem. There's a TV show called Salem. This happens in Salem, you know?
Mhm.
So I think that's an interesting fact about how centralized witchcraft is in American like storytelling traditions.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it makes sense, right? Like it's literally like kind of almost the earliest. It's the earliest of the colonies, or one of them, right? Like, and there's something about that Massachusetts Bay Colony and its culture that really influenced everything that the United States grew to be. So, like, it is interesting. There's like this idea of like what scared those people still kind of just embedded into the DNA of
Yeah.
like the country itself. You know what I mean? I also thought interesting, you mentioned Salem, and at that time, a few years after this, that show Sabrina the Teenage Witch came out. I was a fan. I always thought that movie or that show was
Yeah.
really funny, but like
Also set in Salem, right?
the cat's name is Salem, and it's interesting because when I saw this movie, I was like, I bet you this is why this cat was a black cat that talked in the show, and I looked it up, and it didn't necessarily say that, but before the TV show, the cat Salem was an orange cat that never spoke, but in the show, it's a black cat that speaks. Only like 2 or 3 years after this movie, I was like, and this was a
What do you
hit. I
mean
was like,
before the TV show?
because like that character is like a comic book character, Archie
A
Comics.
comic book character. Gotcha.
Yeah. So like that character becoming like that cat character becoming like the one that is really popular from that show. I really feel like it has to do something with this character Binks that like is a black talking cat.
Makes sense.
I don't know. I'm just doing some investigation, I guess.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like adding
Detective.
to the mythology, the modern mythology.
For sure. I thought, and also going back just to what you guys were talking about like what's been borrowed. We're talking about Bill the zombie, right? That's another one of these like completely, at least African related things, right? The whole idea of the zombie is from slave plantations in the Caribbean, right?
Right.
That's a thing that's been
Mm.
taking another one of these pieces that has been kind of appropriated by American horror. And then you almost never see black or black led zombie films either, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
That just struck me as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I wonder how much of this like appropriating what we see now as like modern horror tropes from indigenous peoples. I wonder how much of that comes from the retelling and the looking in on a culture you're not involved with and being like, that shit's scary. Like without necessarily taking in all of the context, why it's there, but more just being like, whoa. It's like I don't understand Chinese. So when I hear it, it sounds like this to me. So now I'm gonna build this idea about it.
And well, that's really interesting. Even the Salem whole witch thing, like, right, started largely with an African person. Like
Right.
the
Mm.
Crucible, like they talk about the real life person in like that play, The Crucible, but the character Tituba is like, that's a real person. That was a real enslaved person from that time who was also convicted of this. And it was a lot of the white like wives of Salem, like saying, well, like I met with Tituba, and then after that things happen. So like there's always, so I think even it goes back to that. And I think there's also a lot in like Southern horror of like the idea of like something out is going out there in the fields and I don't know what's happening. I think we even saw a little bit of that in Interview with the Vampire.
Yeah, I was just thinking
You know what I
that.
mean?
Mhm.
So I think you're onto something, that idea of America where for a long time there were all these cultures living smashed side by side, but not interacting at all and just looking at each other and going, they're doing something that's bad.
Mhm.
And
Totally.
sometimes I wonder if like the creation of the country kind of made the witch trials specifically something that it wouldn't have been. We'll see, because like every new thing has to have its own traditions and stuff. So early America, like the witch trials were in 1692. So America was so young then. It wasn't even America then. It wasn't even the United States. But all these myths and legends from other cultures were colliding here, you know? It's like, well, we're from wherever. We're British, we're Irish, slaves from various African countries and tribes and colonies and indigenous people and natives. And we believe this. We have a woman like this. That's basically a witch. And they're like, well, we believe in this from the dead and the bride of Satan from whatever. And we have, and they're all there and everybody's just scared and superstitious as was people were at the time. And then the witch trials kind of come in as we see today when everything is, everything gets everything gets what's the word I'm actually looking for? Um
What, sensationalized? What, like
no. It comes together. It's like when a company buys all the other companies that do the same thing.
merged? Like
Merged is close, but there's like a really like buzzy corporate word I want to use to really make it to tie it again, to tie it to what happens now. Consolidate. Everything gets consolidated around now the Salem witch trials. And it's like, oh, your superstitions about witches? Well, they had these trials and it was witches. Actually, they found witches. They found witches up in Massachusetts. So we got witches here now. And then it becomes the American myth of witches, and it's become centralized because of the witch trials in the city, and it branches out from there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The term witch hunt is used so often these days, but like, I wonder if the witch trials were just another witch hunt, which is like to say like
Right.
the kind of more generalized use of that term. Like I'm thinking of almost like the communist trials in the 50s, right? Senator McCarthy. So I'm thinking like how much of it was political, right? We don't learn a lot about this in American history, but like that time period, the 1690s to 1680s, like there were wars happening on American soil. There were revolutionary wars, there were slave revolts, there were wars against Native American tribes. Like it was not light. These early colonies had their own version of the politics that we have today. So I wonder how much of it is also like we found a scapegoat that makes us feel better, and now it's these women. Later, it's going to be Africans. Later, it's going to be Arabs. Later, it's going to be something else. But like the same
and
thing.
honestly, witch hunts and these kind of things are also used to target. I mean, first, we didn't even really talk about it, and maybe we won't get too deep into it, but the targeting of women, right? Just generally,
Sure.
she's a witch, and that's why witches are always women, and if it's a man with magic, he's a wizard,
Right.
Yeah.
A witch being an exclusively pretty much feminine term in culture and pop culture, whether every culture believes that or not, that's pretty much accepted. To have these three witches and these three big actresses, they're the villains of the movie. It's actually really interesting in that regard. But yeah, witch used as a dog whistle to harass or discriminate against or murder women, but it also becomes anybody that acts weird, whatever society at the time's definition of weird, whether it's people with mental disabilities, physical disabilities. It's like, you know what I mean? Even if you think different, if you're too good at something, even, it's like, a witch, bring it back to normal, get rid of this abnormality,
Yeah, and I think the thing you said about everybody being superstitious at the time is really important to think about too. Like, most pre-modern societies and a lot of modern societies, like the idea of like the spiritual world it's not separate, right? Like it's integral. It's the way the world works, right? And so if you live in a world that doesn't have science, that doesn't know what germs are, that doesn't have any of these things, but you believe that the devil is real and he's in the woods, then you're probably going to start making a lot of wild accusations about a lot of things, because it's all going to link. Like, that's going to be the explanation for a lot of shit.
Yes.
The devil's in the woods. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then holding on to what you know about the world being like your religion or your faith, anything that falls outside of that, that's
it's the devil.
The devil and is evil.
Right.
So I can't even fathom anything past what my scripture is telling me.
Right.
And also, when I break my own scripture, it's because the devil convinced me to do it. Right? If I break my own thing, it's that woman. She came in. She's a witch. She's a devil.
Yeah.
That's why I cheated on my wife. Right? It's like,
a
take away
curse
the blame.
befell me, and I stumbled.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, for sure.
Let's get into casting in a second. This movie does not have great like scores on the websites and things, but it's a family classic. It's a Disney family witch classic.
Huge cult hit. Like, a certain generation, especially I feel like people that I talk to who are just a handful of years younger than me, 5-ish years younger than me. Like, it's a big movie, so it's definitely a hit.
Yeah, definitely.
It almost doubled its box office, its budget. Budget was 28, it made 48 in the box office, and I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure.
And, I was thinking about this. I'm sure it made a bunch of money in VHS and DVD sales over the years.
Yeah,
which is just a short analog moment. Like they're getting rid of revenue streams as we get rid of DVDs, and everybody. I don't even think people don't want DVDs, but the market forces, which is really just corporations of like streaming and everything, it's like, oh, we don't have DVDs and VHS sales anymore. But those were big money makers for these studios, and it's a whole revenue stream that's gone now.
Yeah.
So that's actually kind of sad.
It's super sad, and I miss it. I miss watching the bloopers on while the credits were rolling. Just because as a VHS, you don't have option to check out anything else. You're like, oh man.
Yeah, you have to watch it all the way through, or even DVD with the menu. Like a lot of times when you buy a movie, well, there's just not effort put into those things all the time. And even when it is, like the behind the scenes of like some of these big movies, sometimes it's so bland. I'm like, I don't even want that behind the scenes if that's what you're gonna give me. Give me some real bloopers, man. But it's all cut and edited and curated so much that it's not even interesting.
True.
For sure. It's just it's so interesting to think about how that transition has happened, because we think about losing these sort of like VHS or DVD, like technology just moved on. People want the new thing, but it's like, do people want that, or is that the option that we've left them with? Because I think a lot of people would still prefer if that was the way things were still done, we'd still have the VHS or we'd still have the DVD.
Yeah.
I was never sitting there like, oh, this is so grainy. If only there was a better version. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we all fall victim to convenience of streaming,
Yeah.
but I still want physical media. I'll just leave it at that. Let's get into casting. Unless you guys have anything else that like you really thought about with this movie or brought up, or
I was just
I'm
gonna
really
say,
flew today. I feel like flew faster than usual.
I was just gonna say, as far as that last piece, you know what I mean? Like, I lost it. It doesn't matter.
The convenience of like
The
not having to
convenience.
store things also is part of it.
Oh, that's what I was gonna
Definitely
say
yeah. Go ahead.
about streaming, like, and like high definition. Like I find sometimes, like especially when I watch like older things or some of these streaming services where they kind of upgrade it to a high def like image, I'm like, I don't like this. Like those special effects are clearly terrible. Like because it's so high definition, like the graininess hid some of that from us, you know?
Yeah, it sets you back to that time where you have those expectations, where you're like, oh yeah, I'm in this movie. This is the type of movie it is. But then when you're seeing like those TVs where you can see people's makeup and you can see like all the, you're like, oh no, I don't need to see all this.
Yeah. The graininess and the static on the tape, that's what made it special.
Yeah, for sure.
Chef's kiss.
And when things had to really be planned out ahead of time, so there was a lot of thought put into it instead of like, oh, we're just like we're a lot of music now, we'll just dub in, we'll just keep going. I hate being on set and they're like, oh, just keep rolling, no, cut and start over, let's plan it out. Let's figure it out. Let's do casting. Let's do some quick casting.
For
sure. Cue the casting music that we don't have.
This is Black Cat. Wasn't that it?
It's different every week now. Black.
It is.
Cast. Theme. For white. Movies.
This is like 80s new wave. I love it.
It should change based on the movie, whatever we're watching. The vibe should change with the. So this one would be like a little like. Oh.
I really prefer us talking about the sound effects that we don't have than actually having.
Let's start with the witches.
Cool.
It's easy to distinguish them in the movie, right? Bette Midler is the leader. Sarah Jessica Parker is kind of the ditzy, sexual one. Kathy's kind of like the bumbling sidekick, right? But they could really, we didn't talk about this before. I didn't really think about it, but it could really be any combination of three that you wanted. They wouldn't have to necessarily fit these archetypes.
Yeah, it could be any three personality types that kind of.
So I wonder if for casting we should just do like, give me your three witches, or should we do it one by one?
Let's go three witches.
Yeah, let's do the three witches.
Okay. Give me your three witches. B, who you got for your three witches?
Yeah, let me I have wrote it down on this notes app. Cool. Winnie, that's the Bette Midler character. I went Oprah. Mary, the Kathy Najimy character, Loretta Devine. And Sarah, the Sarah Jessica Parker character, Regina Hall. And I am casting this as if this is like 93, 94.
Okay. I was gonna say, yes. Witches in there, bro.
No.
Oprah.
This is 94.
And you said Oprah, and you got the green light. You got it. And I assume it's directed by Ava DuVernay. If it was today.
Yes. Back then, I don't know. Is this an Ernest Dickerson thing? I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Okay, cool. Should I go next? I can go.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Right. So for the three witches, I have one, Queen Latifah. We're shooting this today. 2,
Can't go wrong with Queen Latifah.
That's great.
You know,
Can't go
if there
wrong.
is a Black Witch movie, she should be the lead, even
Ex-
now,
Mhm.
or
yeah.
at least the matriarch or the mentor or something. Like,
Yeah, godmother, fairy godmother
Mhm.
sort of deal. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, she'd be incredible. 2, Regina King. And then I'm sure you can guess 3, Tiffany Haddish.
Tiffany Haddish.
That is
Got to do it.
consistency.
All right, I'm going younger than you guys, modern day. My lead witch is Nicole Byer.
Oh, yeah.
Phenomenal.
My Sarah Jessica Parker is Ego Lodum,
Oof.
SNL, and
Oh.
our improv buddy. And Kathy is Amber Ruffin
Mm.
from the Amber Ruffin Show. Really funny.
Yeah, that's a dope lineup, those 3.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I think they would just be really hilarious, and they all are different type of comedians, like wildly different.
For sure.
And Nicole's a star, so she's leading it off, man. Come on, if you don't green light Nicole,
You don't
Yeah.
know what you're doing.
I don't even want to know you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Pop the
Amber's
joint.
already had it. They've all had shows. Echoes on SNL. Come on, man. This is the next gen. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Wake up. Wake up. Uh, who next? Are we going to do the kids? I mean, that's all pretty much there
Yeah.
is.
I had the 3 witches, the 3 kids, and then a voice for the cat.
Oh, that's
Okay,
smart.
who you
I
got
didn't-
for Max for the main kid?
I went with Jaleel White.
Oh, because you're doing
Ooh,
93, so you got Urkel.
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, might have to delay, might be a 94 movie so he could be 18 just to keep
Mhm.
everything running smooth. But yeah, Jaleel
Eh,
White. I felt like back in the 90s, there was just such that hard line between being a TV actor and a movie actor that you just didn't get the amount of like flow through that you get now that really allows people to become bigger stars.
That's what I was thinking. You got to convince them that you can do the transition from TV to movies, but once you do that, dope.
Got it.
Uh, okay, so for Max, I went with Shamik Moore, voice of Spider-Man, voice of Miles Morales, and
Yeah, I think
just
you know, solid 30.
he's a grown man, but we'll age him down. We'll make it work. We're trying to work long grown people hours on set. We'll make
Who
it
do you
seem like
got,
he's
Aaron?
18.
So I guess I'll go with the kid from Blackish, the young twin.
Yeah, Miles Brown, I think.
Yeah, Miles, not Scribner. He's just too old. I gotta go young. I gotta go. He's the
Okay.
only one I could really think of. He's 18. Looks like a grown man. Jesus God, this kid looks so mature. But yeah, that's what I rock with, man.
Nice.
The younger sister. Anybody do that?
Yeah.
Cool. I went again 93, 94, Tatiana Ali.
Yeah, of course.
But see, isn't she the same age as Urkel? She was younger.
She's a couple years younger, yeah. It wouldn't be as big of an age difference, but she'd have been more like, well, I don't know what the difference between those two characters was. I don't know how old Max was. She was 8, but anyways,
All we know is he was too old to be a virgin. That's all we know.
everybody knew that. The ghost knew that. The zombie knew it.
Goodness gracious. Amanda, you got that?
Oh yeah, yeah. I went with she's a little older, but that's all right. I went with the youngest daughter on Blackish. I went with Marseille Martin. Throw her in there.
Naturally. You know, it's just too hard for me to cast that young. We're doing a casting call. That's just the way it's gonna be.
Okay.
And then
The
Allison, the girl,
Allison, yeah.
the girl interest.
Rashida Jones.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Come on.
I went with I think one of you might have cast her recently, China Anne McClain.
Oh yeah, she's on Black Lightning for a while.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go Storm Reed. I think we've casted her a few times, but I'll go
Yeah,
Storm.
Storm's great.
Pod favorite. And then I didn't cast the cat, but I can think of something. I cast Billy Butcher, the little zombie
You
dude.
gotta
But yeah, you want to go?
Sure. So for the cat, the voice, I'm gonna change the story up a little bit. He continued to age as he was a cat, right? No longer a
you got Morgan
teenage
Freeman
boy.
in there.
Huh?
You got Morgan Freeman in there.
Ice-T.
Oh,
Hard cat.
Ice-T.
That cat is tough. Come on.
That's great. The voice of the cat. I'm thinking, who's like a deep voice? It's got to be like a
On you.
shocking voice.
Tell me.
Huh?
You tell me. What is collective casting?
Yeah. You're right. You're right. I might do.
I'm gonna go for fun. I'm gonna go Chris Tucker. But he's got to be like energetic Chris Tucker. Come on, man. Don't touch that book, man.
Okay, if that's the case, then I got to go Chris Rock. Just because it'd be a fun voice.
Now
Just a
what?
fun voice.
How you doing? Touching
that butt, man. Scrunched up face cat.
You said Billy Butcher. I can do one of those. Gregory Hines.
Ooh.
I do Echo Kellum from Grand Crew. Tall, he's kind of already got the hair, actually.
Yeah.
So
It does.
Yeah.
From Grand Crew.
I went with
and Arrow and a bunch of other stuff. Echo's killing it. So shout out.
Oh yeah, he's great. I went with Ashton Sanders. Just physicality wise and just presence.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I can see it.
Anything else? Any others that anybody did?
No.
You had more? I didn't have any more.
No, that was it.
That was it.
You guys didn't cast the bus driver?
Yeah, but so creepy. Oh man, so horny this movie, bro. Like he's purposely hitting bumps while she's sitting on his lap, dog.
Yeah. That was just
why
wrong.
is she sitting on his lap in the first place?
1993,
man is doing his job.
He didn't ask for this. He's just trying to make it through the night, through the shift.
You'd think so. That made his night. He probably was like, "You can sit up here, little missy." Like that's
Right.
one of those lines from back then.
One thing in this movie that did stand out to me more than anything else, more than any other like special effect or whatever, was just the 555 phone number. Like he tries to spit game at Allison in the beginning, tries to give her his phone number, and she opens it up and it's like 555 whatever, and it always makes me think that there's an old George Carlin bit where he says that was the thing that takes him out of movies more than anything else. Like is 555. So like no like zombies, all that stuff is great, but the 555 simply could not suspend my disbelief.
What's crazy is that some of this movie, I think most of this movie was actually shot in Massachusetts and at the Plymouth Plantation of all things to read. Yeah, the 555 is interesting. What also is funny is how little you actually need to ever hear or see the phone number in movies. Like if you really go back to a movie, you could always cut before the phone number is actually said out loud or written down. I was thinking about this slightly before this movie, but then when I watched it too, I was like, do we need to see the number? Because in movies, when people are on phone calls, they almost never say bye, they just hang up.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times with numbers, it could be the same thing. We don't never really need to... There's only a few movies like where you need to know what the number is because it has some significance to the story. So you could almost always cut.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even need to see the characters say bye to each other. He's like, let me get your number. She's like, okay, cut. Like, okay. They didn't hang out the rest of the day. He's calling her later. But they're always like, oh, thanks. Here's the number. Bye. It's like, we don't need to see them say bye.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's so true. And I feel like there's just a missed opportunity with those phone numbers too. Like, I feel like the person who took advantage of putting a phone number out there was Mike Jones, the rapper, great rapper from the Houston area.
Well, that's interesting because now there is a service where you can call celebrities or text them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw recently on Shaquille O'Neal's Instagram. It says call
Yeah,
me. It says call me, and it's like, oh, what? But if you
right.
call this number he has, something happened. He's like, oh, it says text me. So now you actually could, like Armand is saying, do a cross marketing thing with a
Totally.
number in a movie. Because if you put a real number in there, people will call it. That's why they have to use the 555.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
People will like spam somebody's number, and it's happened to people, and people have even gotten doxxed and like, really lost it because of things like this. So
Yeah, didn't
there's a
that
reason for it, but it's also
875309 person like really have a hard time for a while after that song? 8675309. You know that?
I remember hearing something like that, so I'm sure it's true.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, they're taking advantage of it now. Back then, they had to make up a fake one.
Shout out to Mike Jones, changed the entire phone number game.
Change the game, and you could still call it to this day. I've tried, and you
What
just
happens
get
now?
you just get you get a voicemail from him. You get his voicemail response of like, "Thank you for calling Mike Jones. You're a big fan. Who?" And then he'll just do a little bit, and then voicemail box is full.
That is amazing. That man, he is a servant to his fan base. I swear to God.
More people need to learn from him. You know. Yeah, no, this was a solid movie, enjoyable, and fun, and not scary. So right up my alley. I don't want to speak for everyone else, but right up my alley.
Well, it is like a difference between scary and like really something that really gets in your head.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like I don't know all these movies that well, but maybe like the Saw movies aren't so scary, but they might really mess with your head.
Yeah.
Or
feel like
maybe the other way where they are scary, but other movies like Poltergeist or something, they really mess with your head in a way that's different than just like jump scares or blood and guts.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. For anybody who's ever seen Hereditary, which is also about witches, I'm just thinking that's a perfect example. That one stayed in my head far too long.
Oof,
Forgot about Hereditary. Man, creepy. It's creepy in the mud.
too creepy. Yeah.
First time I saw The Ring, that was creepy.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it again later, like years later, and it wasn't as creepy. But the first time I was like, oh man, I ain't messing with no rings, bro. Rings, I don't want to see any rings or any grainy video.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I
Turn
don't
that
want to
off real
see
quick.
an eclipse because that's a ring.
Don't even think about getting engaged to me. I don't want to see it. I don't
Yeah,
want
we
to see
trade
no.
necklaces. That's it, man. This is a good pod.
For sure. Super
Who
fun.
knows? We might have one more scary one in us as we get, or like Halloween thing. We got to think about it. But we'll be back, and you'll see, and we'll figure it out, and that'll be that.
For sure. Thanks for joining. Hopefully you check out the movie. It was fun.
Mm-hmm. Until next time. Peace.